Start with a refinery, not a capital. A reported drone strike hits fuel processing inside Russia. The source treats that as a root problem, not a headline. Fuel has to move. Crude has to move. Workers, rail cars, insurance, and capital move after them. The source estimates Ukrainian military pressure can affect 10 to 15% of Russian refining. Treat that number as an estimate, not settled fact. But the logic is visible. When processing becomes exposed, geography starts asking for another answer. This episode follows that answer east, not toward a slogan, not toward a victory lap, toward a line on the map. The first question is simple. What actually moves when refineries become vulnerable? The answer is not only oil. The whole route system starts to move. For decades, Russian refining followed consumers. It also followed export logic. Refineries sat closer to older oil regions, large cities, and western maritime corridors. The Baltic mattered. The Black Sea mattered. European Russia mattered most. That map made sense in peacetime. It shortened delivery to consumers. It simplified exports through ports. It placed processing near the country's densest population belt. But Alfred Mehin's sea power world has a hard lesson. Sea access is power. Sea exposure is also vulnerability. A map built for trade can become a map built for targeting. The source reads the refinery strikes through that lens. Again, the exact damage share needs verification. But the root question survives the fact check. Pressure on western-facing refining creates a search for depth. Drop one answer in the comments. What matters more here? Security, exports, or Chinese demand? That answer changes how you read the rest. The first answer lands here. What moves is bigger than one refinery. The whole route logic shifts with it. The source's answer points beyond the Urals. That phrase should stay careful. It is a projection, not a completed relocation. The source projects a shift of refining and industrial mass eastward. This is not romance about Siberia. The drivers are distance, depth, and resources. Processing closer to oil fields reduces one vulnerability. Processing farther from western strike zones reduces another. The center of gravity starts to slide. Picture a plate under pressure. It does not disappear. It grinds toward a lower friction line. Mackinder made Eurasian interior space a strategic problem. His old formula was about geography as constraint. No quote is needed here. The idea is enough. Interior depth can become power when the edges feel exposed. But this is not a switch. Here is the counter reading. Moving refining capacity is expensive. It needs labor, power, rail capacity, housing, and time. Russia may harden existing refineries instead. It may repair faster. It may disperse storage and air defense. Those options matter. The route east is possible in the source's reading. It is not automatic. The second answer lands here. The route points east. The next question is why land routes become more attractive. The source uses an old strategic split. The words are heavy. Thalassocracy means power through the sea. Telerocracy means power through land. The idea is simple. Sea routes move volume. Land routes create depth. Mahan helps explain the sea half. Ports, fleets, insurance, choke points, and sea lanes shape power. But exposed ports can become exposed corridors. Mackinder helps explain the land half. The interior of Eurasia can protect what the coastline cannot. Then Spikeman complicates both. The edge also matters. Borders, crossings, and corridors decide whether the interior can breathe. That is where the route becomes concrete. The source points to two alternatives. One is the Northern Sea route. It would move cargo along Arctic waters and coastal corridors. The other is internal rail. Those rail corridors run through Eurasia's interior. They connect resources, processing, and China-facing demand. Do not overstate either option. Arctic routes are limited. Rail corridors are costly. But together they explain the direction. The third answer lands here. The route goes where sea exposure weakens. It goes where land depth becomes useful. The next hinge is smaller than a map. It is a rail gauge. At the border, strategy becomes measurement. The source names Zabaikalsk and Manjuli. That crossing is the root hinge in this story. The source reports a new railway agreement tied to Putin and Xi. It also says the line would use Chinese standard gauge. The source gives Chinese standard gauge as 1435 millimeters. It contrasts Russian broad gauge at 1520 millimeters. Small measurement. Large consequence. A rail gauge decides where cargo changes systems. It decides who builds rolling stock. It decides whose logistics standard reaches across the border. It can mark dependency without saying dependency aloud. Brzezinski's Eurasian frame would ask a practical question. Who controls the pivots? In this episode, the pivot is not only a country. It is a crossing, a gauge, and a financing path. The source projects China as the likely investor. Say that carefully. It is a projection. It is not a proven financing map. It is also not proof of motive. China could gain demand, access, and leverage. Russia could gain depth and lose freedom of movement. Trace it yourself on the map. Drop the next corridor you think matters most. I missed this detail on first reading. The gauge looked technical. Then it became the hinge of the route. The fourth answer lands here. Who pays is also who connects. Who connects may later price the connection. The source's answer to who gains is China. That needs a careful frame. China could gain access to resources. It could gain influence over corridors. It could gain demand-side leverage over Russian output. Russia could gain strategic depth. It could also gain a deeper dependency. That is incentive alignment. It is not proof of Chinese intent. The source's reading goes further. It suggests China benefits from the eastward shift. That still cannot become motive. Benefit is not proof of intent. Incentive is not admission. China may have incentives to finance eastward connectivity. China may also avoid the full bill. Here is the first counter-reading. Russia may not relocate at scale. It may repair, harden, disperse, and defend. That path is cheaper. It also protects existing labor pools. Here is the second counter-reading. China may prefer optionality. It may want access without ownership. It may want leverage without full exposure. That matters because infrastructure creates obligations. Brzezinski's Eurasian vocabulary helps here. Power often sits in dependencies, not declarations. The state that controls a corridor may not own the territory. It may only own the bottleneck. That can be enough. The last question opens here. Who gains is conditional. China gains leverage if the route locks in. Russia gains depth if the route remains sovereign. Euro-Atlantic leverage narrows if the mass moves inland. The center of gravity is not a trophy. It is a pressure point. Then the route leaves steel. It enters people. The source says European Russia holds roughly 80% of the population. It says that population sits on roughly 20% of the territory. The source projects a long shift in that balance. It imagines 80-20 becoming 70-30, then 60-40. Treat that as scenario, not forecast. But do not miss the emotional scale. A refinery moves first. A rail corridor follows. A workforce follows the corridor. Housing follows the workforce. Schools, hospitals, and ministries follow the housing. Then a map starts feeling different. The source even raises a sharper image. A third capital beyond the Urals. A reserve capital. Not as a confirmed plan. Not as a forecast. As a scenario that shows the scale of the thought. That is the emotional peak. A state under pressure does not only defend territory. It may move its civilizational weight. It may pull its factories behind mountains. It may pull its people toward colder depth. It may redraw its own center without changing its borders. This is why the route matters. It begins with a refinery strike. It crosses old consumer geography. It passes the Urals. It touches Arctic water. It narrows at Zabaykalsk and Manjuli. It changes gauge at the border. It ends as a question about cities. Not the cities on the old map. The cities a future map may need. That is the completed route. The line is drawn. The pressure did not simply break the system. In the source's reading, it started moving the system east. Comment with one word. Relocation, hardening, or overreach. If this map changed how you see the war, follow the next map. This series is just getting to the roots.